Hello, bakers. This is Mark Floerke, your host today for Forum Friday. I'm the Community Forum Manager at BAKERpedia, as well as the baking instructor. I'm sitting in for Dr. Lynn today and giving you a brief update on what's happening in our community forums. First up, I want to address some continuing conversations, which is always great to see the members stepping in and asking more questions, sharing information. And we have the first one is Sumaya, who's looking to make the perfect commercial burger bun. And so where I've pointed her in the direction is some typical standard ratios that are used in the commercial industry. And the important thing is also to use a pre-ferment there, usually a sponge of about 4 hours. That helps with processing for shaping and things like that, as well as shelf life and a nice moist interior texture. And then of course it's high ratios of fat and sugar, somewhere in the 8 to 12% range is pretty typical. And so hopefully that helps Sumaya out to get closer to her goals. And then we also have brown spots and sponge cake. And this is a conversation that has been taking place for a little while. And we have a member who shared the ingredients that they're using, but not the amounts or the method. And so we can only kind of guess at this point. And trying to estimate based on things that I've seen in the past is the first thing I would look to is baking soda. And that is either the baking soda is being measured wrong, or there's just generally too much in the formula. And that can often cause this mottling on the surface and or even brown spots on the interior crumb. And so look to the baking soda as one of the first things. It can also react with some preservatives and other ingredients. And the other thing is then in your mixing method, depending on whether you're using this from a dry blend or what, but making sure that your ingredients are always at room temperature. If you have fat that is cold, or even if the fat is room temperature and then you have ice cold eggs and water, then you can cause these little fat lumps to form, and sometimes then the baking soda or baking powder will attach to these lumps, and as they then melt in the baking process and the baking soda starts to rise and produce gas, then they kind of go through the cake and make these tunnels and leave these brown spots then on top where the tunnels are. So look for tunnels in your cake, look for brown spots on top, check your baking soda, make sure your ingredients are at room temperature when you're mixing these things, right? And then we also have it, I always love pointing out these conversations that are continuing, because it's great to see members supporting each other, and that we're having an effect. We have something that's helping people all over the world. And so this is a conversation about natural bread flavors, particularly for the market on the African continent. We talked about our new member who joined the forum and introduced himself from Mali last week. And so this same member has revived a great thread talking about natural flavor in breads for the African continent. And so right now it's being exasperated, I guess, in the sense is that because of the pandemic, it's getting more difficult to get certain ingredients, especially if they have to come from Europe or other sources. And shipping is getting very problematic or extremely expensive, because so many of the shipping channels are being used up for other things like vaccines and PPE and so on. And so it's interesting that looking at ways to flavor these breads would be then looking to your pre-ferments again. You can talk about different pre-ferments such as a biga, which is a stiff pre-ferment that is relatively low water, usually anywhere from 8 to 12, maybe 14 hours of fermentation. It tends to give you a more of a mellow lactic acid type of flavor note. or you can go for a poolish. And a poolish are long pre-ferments, usually 12 to 18 hours, and they're usually high in water. And they produce more acidic, more vinegary type of fermented notes, right? And then it's, if you're just kind of just a little bit yeasty, it might be like a sponge, which is in the 55 to 60%, sometimes 70% water, and then the pre-ferments can anywhere be from 2 to 6 hours. Most common is 4, but sometimes some people do them shorter as well. And so those would be good starting points. And of course, pre-ferments are usually held at like an ambient temperature, 70 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Some are done in proofing chambers slightly warmer, but that is, again, that would be to accelerate them. Most commonly, they're done at ambient temperatures. In larger bakeries, they would use often a sponge room, a room that is held at consistent temperatures so that the flavor system will always be consistent from the fermentation coming out of that area. So those are things I suggest, and look to local ingredient sources, local fruits and vegetables that may have certain enzymatic activity to help break down the carbohydrates to fermentable sugars and give you certain flavor notes. By adding just a flavor to a pre-ferment, it will usually not survive the pre-ferment and will be lost and everything. But if you're adding, say, something like pineapple to your pre-ferment, the enzyme activity from the pineapple is going to accelerate some of the ability for the yeast to ferment from the sugars there. It'll break down the carbohydrates better, and it'll in a different ways, and then it gives you very interesting flavor notes that way, sort of that they're sour but not vinegary. This sort of sour, almost like a wheat beer type of ale sort of notes and things like that. And so it's interesting things that can be done there with different fruits and vegetables, right? Lastly, I want to remind everybody we have our interactive seminar coming up on February the 11th. Don't forget to sign up. This is going to be about CBD and hemp extracts in baking, so will prove to be very, very interesting. And these seminars take place from 9 until 10:30 Pacific Standard Time. And there's always, Dr. Lin always reserves time at the end for questions. And so it is live, and we're able to answer your questions live. You just type in the chat box or the Q&A box, and then we will get those questions read out and discussed with the team that is on the seminar at that time. So that's all I'll have for you today. Look forward to seeing you all in the forums. Have yourself a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you in the forums and talk to you again next week. Take care. Bye-bye.